A few pieces of homework or checking in before we get started. Um, who here cusses? All right, fuck yeah. I'm gonna cuss then. Just want to make sure we didn't have any people that were gonna walk out. Um, who here has something to do with design in your role? All right, that's dope. Okay, cool. Who here's heard of me? Just so I know background. Oh shit, that's crazy. Um, well, my name is Matthew Smith. I go by Matthew, not Matt. One time I was in a bike shop about this size in Fort Collins, Colorado, and they said, Matt Smith, your bike is ready. And three of us came to the counter. And I said, fuck no, never again. So I'm a Matthew. I go by that full name and I will correct you. I will say, no, I'm sorry, it's pronounced Matthew. Um, my story begins with something similar to like this. I think probably all of us started here with the origin of the universe. But actually, my design story starts when I'm 9 years old. So I was 9 when I had to do my first profit and loss statement on my first lemonade stand. And then I owed my mom money. She actually charged me for I didn't make enough profit, so I had to pay her back for the lemonade, the use of the table, etc., which should tell you a lot about my childhood. That same year, I actually won a logo contest at my school against the sixth graders. So, as a third grader, to win against sixth graders, I don't know if you know what that's like, or if you can remember that, but that would be like if 120-year-olds were really big and taller and cooler than us, and we were better than them. That would feel dope, right? So that's what it felt like to me. And that started this journey for me where, wow, okay, I've got something. People approve of what I do and it feels good. So in my home setting with my family, my dad's an alcoholic, workaholic, tough guy. He grew up in a tough town in Roswell, New Mexico, with where my mom and my grandparents were. Which, if you get to know me, it explains a lot because of all the aliens shit and all that stuff. But he's a tough guy, hard to please, and I grew up under that. And then my mom too was just not really available. I was a latchkey kid. And who else grew up in our generation and had both parents working and had to be at home alone? A few of you? Okay. So maybe you know what I'm talking about. You just kind of had to take care of yourself. And so when these sixth graders, when the kids around me really, showed up and they were like, wow, you're really good at this, I doubled down hard and really got into art. So I got lucky. I'll show you a little bit about my experience, but in high school and college, I mixed up a few things here, and I've got this one first. But this guy's name is Richard DeVore, and who knows what the Bauhaus is? All right, sweet. So his professors had escaped Germany in the diaspora and had landed at Cranbrook and Black Mountain College, which is not far from us here. So those teachers came from the Bauhaus, escaping the Germans, and started those schools. And that's where he got all his education. And then he moved to Colorado, where I went to school, because he liked mountains. And I was into that. I want to be around mountains. He wants to be around mountains. So I got an incredible education from this guy, Richard DeVore. He taught us all about the visual language, why diagonals are more exciting and dynamic than a horizontal or a vertical, how we can say something is organic or how we can say something is structured, how something has lift or how something has weight. And knowing all of that and being able to speak to it, he would put a pot out on a table like this, and we would have to say, well, what is it doing? Does it have lift? Is it organic? Does it have meaning behind it? And if you got one little piece of that wrong, F for the day, you can make it up the next day. So that kind of rigor in learning how to communicate about design, about the visual world, was really the start of things for me. And in addition to that, I got really into drawing and graffiti. So this should indicate a little bit about how tough my, childhood was at the start. I was in a lot of pain and I was drawing about it. And then I got really into graffiti and I loved what was happening in that world. But then around 2004, I found myself in an interesting situation. I was living in Philadelphia and I had learned how to use Blogger, and there was an opportunity to change six digits, and I could change the background color of a website, and that was game over for me. Being able to figure out CSS and start messing around with things. And I did my first website for 500 bucks for a CPA, and then I did my church's website for $8,000, and then I did another church website, and then I did one of their customers, and all of a sudden things were moving. And I, at the time, had been working at a nonprofit, and I was making about 24K a year. So to replace all that salary in about 3 or 4 months in design, that showed me where I wanted to go in my life. It was a ton of fun. This site was really my first foray into agency life. So anybody seen this site before? Sweet. So this at the time was a crazy big deal, and I didn't even realize it. So this font here is Archer, which was from Hoffler and Frere Jones. And the only way to have that show up on the web until this was done was to put it in a PNG with a transparent background. But what we did is we used a technology that utilized Flash at the time when we didn't have responsive yet, right, to worry about, and phones and mobile and all that. We actually displayed the font using Flash, and it could be dynamic. So it could pick up the HTML, the actual word in the HTML, and then display it as Flash. And so we could have custom fonts on our site. And I just was trying to do cool stuff. I wasn't trying to be anybody. I just wanted to earn enough money so that I could, feed my family, that kind of thing. But this just absolutely went bonkers on the web. People just couldn't believe that we had figured out some of this stuff, and we were pushing the limits on a lot of things. And at this time, a lot of people were trying to be kind of too cool for school, and I just was trying to have fun. I wanted to stand out. And that was just a real turning point for me, figuring out who I was as a designer. Another that really shifted my experience was I didn't know it at the time, but knowing what I know now, I would highly recommend anybody who's trying to build a career in design or in technology, find a way to do something and give it away for free. Make it available. So what this was is I had collected, let's call it about 2,000 screenshots of headers and footers and lists and ways that articles were displayed and icons and all kinds of things like that. I had kept it in a Flickr. Does anybody remember Flickr? I had kept it in Flickr collections, and then you could see the analytics. They had just launched analytics on this, and I was watching all these people come and view my collections on Flickr. So then a guy named Coy Vin, who probably 2 or 3 people in the room know him, he tweeted about it, and this is like at the very, very beginning of Twitter. And then a woman named Verla Peters and Tina Roth Eisenberg, like all these people that were my heroes, they're like, wow, what is this guy doing? This thing called, over here on Flickr. And it was enough that I thought, okay, let's start a site. And so I got some friends together and I bartered with a buddy and I made Pattern Tap. And what that did is it got me enough recognition as the guy who did Squared Eye, the guy who did Pattern Tap, let's get him to speak at South by Southwest. And that kind of went nuts. I couldn't, and I show up on these panels and I'm giving a talk at South by, and my heroes are around me and they're like, who the shit are you? Where did you come from? And I didn't know. I was like, I don't know. I looked right past me, like, who are you talking to? Because I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I just kept showing up, trying new things, and it was fantastic, but it was scary, right? Like, I'm sure many of you experience this, where it's just like, what am I going to do next? Is it going to work? But I really highly recommend this. This put me on the map in a big way. It was I was able to sell it, not for very much, but I sold my first company, which was kind of neat. And I started doing some work for some startups, which I'll get into here in a minute. And one of the things that I learned really quickly was how email was consistently at the bottom of the barrel. So you'd do all this work on an amazing app or a website, but then email was this sort of second thought. And I thought, wait a second, the customers are looking at these emails far more frequently. Something's wrong here. We need to up the ante on emails. And so I launched just a WordPress site to start with, and I called it Really Good Emails. And I wrote my buddy, Mark DiCristina at MailChimp, and I said, hey, I came up with an idea called Really Good Emails. There's 10 emails on here. Do you guys want to sponsor this for like $1,500 a month? At the time, that was like my mortgage. It was a big deal. And he just replied with a GIF of Jerry Maguire that said, you had me at hello. And I thought, all right, like things are moving. This is dope. And so, Really Good Emails, we took it for about 10 years, and I just sold it last year, which was a big accomplishment for a lot more than we did of Pattern Tap. And it became four of us that really built this thing up, and it grew to a size of about 225,000 subscribers on our email list, and over 1 million uniques a year. And we really, took it somewhere. So there's roughly 15,000 or 20,000 emails that you can go and see what normally would just be in people's inboxes. And now you can have a comparison so that you can up the ante on your own emails for an e-commerce or B2B or any sector that you're in. I also helped co-found Atlas Local, which is another co-working space. It was the first one here in Greenville, and that was a ton of fun. And being a part of community was a big important thing to me. Some of you may remember Zarly, and this was one of the first startups that I was a part of, and just an incredible opportunity for me to dive in and see all the things I didn't know. I was terrified to be a creative director and jump in, and I didn't know what I was doing. I felt like I'd started just yesterday. But every day I kept showing up, and people would say, can you do this? Can you do that? No, but I will learn, right? And that was the consistent refrain. So I just kept pushing. I got to do Relay Foods. I became chief creative officer at Relay Foods. It was one of the largest online grocers before Good Eggs and Instacart really took off, and here on the East Coast. And just an incredible experience learning a ton about complex e-commerce. Who knows Ugg shirt and, well, used to be shirt and now office supply. I got to invent something along the way with a guy named Jeff Sheldon that was really interesting. A lot of us love to get posters, but there's no, excellent way to display them. And so we came up with a magnetic but handsome, wooden board that you could display your posters. That was a ton of fun. I started another agency called Fathom and Draft, and then my most recent agency called Bunsen. Agency life was incredible. It was really powerful. We got to do a lot of big things. With Fathom and Draft, we had enormous clients like Walmart um, and Parker Foundation and Gates Foundation, and just some really heavy hitting stuff. It was exciting, but it was also insanely stressful. I'm going to go through my freelance portfolio, and then I'm going to hit some things about freelance and agency that I think will be an interesting conversation later. So one of the things that has been extremely helpful for me, going back here to this is my freelance portfolio. When I decided, I quit the agency life in February, not this year, but last year. And the reason was I was in a workshop, and the workshop I was in was all about really streamlining my life and getting more margin in my life so that I could be more productive, but also so I could have some sanity. I'm coming up on 9 years sober, and serenity is my game. I need it in order to really thrive and make sure that I'm healthy. And so the stresses that come with agency life were kind of antithetical to that. And the question that was asked of me was, what are the next three big targets in your agency business? And then the next question was, what is your 5 year vision? What do you imagine in 5 years your work life looks like? How much are you working? Who are you working with? How often are you working? What times of day are you working? All of those things. And I immediately saw that the agency life for me was directly antithetical to that vision I had. I knew that I wouldn't be able to maintain the integrity of the work I wanted to do running a ship of, 15 people, always worried about what the next thing was going to be, the next problem that was coming up. Some people might be able to do that, but with my nervous system, what I've learned about myself, that wasn't possible. So what I've developed for me is this set. So I do 2 week design blocks to launch business faster. And I talk about specifically who I do that for. And that's been incredibly helpful. I talk about when a client is looking at these, I like to talk about, okay, I work with high impact individuals, venture capital firms, large scale businesses, large scale NPOs. These are my types of clients. So my goal here in displaying a page like this is to help my clients understand, do they fit into these categories? Instead of being very obtuse and generic, I can get specific, and then they can start to pattern match. Oh, we're more like a Tim Ferriss. We're more like a MailChimp. We're more like a KDT. And I want them to see themselves in that, and then they can read these quotations, testimonials to see, all right, I like what people are saying about Matthew. Then I can tell them, here are my simple promises. These are the things that I know I can do for you, and this is exactly how I work. I try and make that as absolutely simple as possible. Then I show them the work. I let them know this is the kind of work that we can get done in short sprints or longer sprints. So you can see some of the clients that I have going with here. Who's played Spike Ball? Pretty fun game. Working with the CEO on that was absolutely fantastic. So, show the work, and then I lead them into common questions. So by showing them common questions, I can help them understand what are the kinds of things that you might run into. So who here has hired a freelancer before? Okay. So my job is to anticipate those kinds of questions that you might be experiencing, or the fears that you might be experiencing about how to handle a situation coming up. Or in my case, I've done some renovation on my home. I've never done that before until I did it my first time. And I didn't know the kinds of questions to ask. And my contractor didn't help me understand those questions. So there was huge asymmetry of information. That asymmetry was exhausting, and I didn't know what to do. So I try and mitigate that asymmetry in my freelance work by asking questions like these. I make sure that I've answered those because I'm looking to alleviate stress, right? One of the best things that I can do as a freelancer is really think about this as a relationship. Who knows, who's ever heard of nonviolent communication? Who's ever heard of the amygdala or the prefrontal cortex? Okay, more. So when I'm in a situation and I'm about to spend a lot of money, and I'm listening to somebody trying to pitch to me, am I more likely like jammed up in my amygdala or my prefrontal cortex? Amygdala. So what's happening is I'm on defense. I need to have my game in action. I need to be ready. Now, of course, some of my logic is working. I'm trying to like listen in, but I'm thinking about this relationship as adversarial, like the client is, right? And I need to, as a freelancer or as even somebody who's running an agency, I need to move them into that place of relationship. And this is what these kinds of questions can do and what this kind of language can do. So I let them know exactly what I do and the things that I refer out, being extremely explicit about that. And then I let them know again, I follow up with the things that I've already said. And that sort of relationship of really being incredibly clear is what I try and bring. And it's what I recommend that other freelancers and other agencies for that matter bring. Many of you know how hard it is just to say what it is you do extremely clearly so anybody can understand it. To me, that's really the center of design. So here are some strong opinions I have about agency versus freelance life. For me, and this is personal to me, and I'll get into some of my values and where this comes from, agencies are high intensity, they're high complexity, and low margin because you have so much overhead, right? Your margins tend to be lower. Now, the market can shift, and some kinds of agencies can have higher margin, but your margin, let's say your margin is 20 or 30%, but you have $1 million project, that can still be okay, right? But it's challenging. Then, if you look at freelance, you have intensity control, low complexity, high margin. That kind of control works well for my personality. Now, some people that won't. That's a different thing, right? But that low complexity for me is I manage me. I don't have to manage 5 other designers and a project manager and a sales lead and the developers, and I don't have to manage everybody's conversations and to build that all up. Now, doing that as a team and figuring out a business that can work like a machine, that's really powerful. That's exciting. But doing it in an agency where things are constantly shifting and changing, the technology around you is constantly changing, not a good fit for me. Agencies can be high impact, large scale, and have agency clout. Freelance can be personal impact, measured scale, and personal clout. So what do I mean by personal clout? If I'm working at an agency, and Ben knows this, Ben was working at my agency, it's hard within an agency to maintain your own portfolio and to continue getting out there and continue being known. Whereas when you're an independent agent, your responsibility is always to have your name out there, always to be developing your own network. So a portfolio, and this is true not just of design, right? But engineering or other tools as well. Your portfolio is one thing, but in a world where more and more people have more and more portfolios, it's the relationships that really are going to determine whether you get business or not. And so I would much rather be building a network and a book of clients rather than just building a fantastic portfolio of work that I worked on with another group of people. So that works much better for me. And I would argue that in this age, we'll see more and more people moving to independent work because of some of these factors. For me, it's about price, feedback, and time. And these are areas that can fall apart in an agency or freelance. You need to know what your value is and what you're worth. You have to be able to capture that feedback cycle with the client and make sure that you have clear communication. And then you need to be able, Ben and I were talking about this earlier, you need to make sure that you're aligned with your client on time, right? So one of the big things that'll happen is a client will say, we just really are behind. We need more time than this 48-hour cycle to give you feedback. And if you're not prepared for that, then you've scheduled work after this, but now this project didn't end on time. And so it's bleeding into the next one, which only causes more chaos for the next client, and so on and so forth. So if you haven't specifically handled that, whether it's freelance or an agency, that'll eat you fast. So these are the kinds of things that I like to pay attention to. For me, determining which of these I fit into is all about the values that are important to me. I value margin, freedom, connection, serenity, play, growth, creativity, curiosity, and agency, meaning the ability to move, right? I want to do what I want when I want. And having those things and getting really clear on those values made it really clear for me where I fit. So doing the value work that's important to know where you want to go in life, I highly recommend. It made a big difference for me. Some lessons learned along the line as I did agency and freelance work. A big one for me is that I'm not selling design, I'm selling freedom. So I noticed this with a lot of design agencies that what they do is they say, we can make your website, or they'll say something like, uh, we design for innovative people. Like, what does that mean? You know, who is that really? And it's not very well defined. It's not clear. I don't know if I fit into that class, right? But if you can help your clients understand that what you sell them is freedom to continue building their business so that they don't have to worry about the design, that you're taking them there. If you can sell them that bigger value, then you can actually up your prices. You can show them all kinds of other values besides a website, which is a commodity. And AI can build a website, right? That's done yesterday. Not even, a couple years from now. That's already been done. So you need to figure out how to be able to sell them something of much, much greater value. Again, when there's that information asymmetry, so many people have never done a website or a brand or know how to, move through these marketing materials. If you can give them a sense that you know what to do, you'll take them on the path, you'll provide the freedom that they need to continue working on their business. That's a much higher value set. The big thing that I talk about a lot with a lot of my friends in this space is, are you an adversary or are you an ally to your client? So generally, there's this relationship with clients and contractors where I'm trying to maintain some sort of timeline and they want as much flexibility as possible. I want to get paid and they want to pay as little as possible. And so there's all these structures that make us adversarial. And if you work at the beginning in your contract and in your methodologies to create more alignment there instead of adversarial relationship, you can really have a much healthier experience with your clients. And they're much more likely at the end of the experience to be really excited about not only working with you again, but promoting you to others. And that's one of the best ways to grow, your freelance business. So figuring that out early and upfront has been important to me. Another one is, it's your fault at most of the time. So a lot of us like to blame our clients for the problems and the miscommunication and their attitudes and the things they didn't know. But you have to remember, again, information asymmetry. Of course they didn't know. Duh, right? It is your job to teach them this material. And if you don't, it's your fault. If the project is going off the rails, it's most often your fault. You didn't have the right boundaries, you didn't have the right information, you didn't give the right feedback, or you didn't listen properly. If you do those things, I've seen it time and again, 95% of the time, you can have a great project that really ends well and everybody's super happy. Another misconception here is that freelance isn't freedom from responsibility, which is what a lot of people enter into freelancing for. It's freedom to choose what you want to be responsible for, right? And you get to decide that, but a lot of people, they go into it without making those decisions. So those things still kind of kick them around and take charge of them. So much about freelancing is choosing the kind of life that you want, the way you want to work, the way you want to show up for your clients. And the same way that you design an interface, design that. Design that experience. Really take it intentionally, move it forward, craft it, and then each time you try something, you're going to learn something new and you create a new variation and you continue to refine and refine. That's taking responsibility. This is something Benton has heard me say a lot, and Akko, my wife, has heard me talk about it. When I was working at Relay Foods, I heard this anecdote that absolutely changed the way I think about communication. So who of you is old enough to remember when we would order out catalogs and a phone before shipping and tracking. Awesome. I love when we have some older people in the audience. So, you're calling in, you're like, I'll take, you're calling REI, I'll take UA 532649. And the ma'am's like, can you repeat that? And you've got to repeat it. And then she says, that'll be somewhere between 6 to 10 weeks until it'll arrive. And you're thinking, ah, really? Okay, I guess. And then you're just biting your nails, wondering when that's going to arrive. But how similar is that to so many freelance experiences, right? Or working with an agency? The opportunity uh, was discovered by CEO at Relay Foods. He got to sit down with the FedEx CEO, and he said something really wild. Their net promoter score was in the toilet, and their customer support calls were through the roof. They were really having a hard time. This is, again, before shipping and tracking. And then they introduced tracking, and nothing else logistically changed, right? Packages still were taking the same amount of time. They would still get stuck, sometimes lost, all that stuff. But now I know where my package is and I can watch it. And their net promoter score skyrocketed, just absolutely flew up. And their customer support calls dropped by like 90%. All because now I can chill. I know where my package is. I know what's going on. It's stuck in a snowstorm in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. It's not going to get here in time. I'm going to go to Walmart and pick something up for my, birthday for my daughter instead. And not my ideal outcome, but way better than biting my nails and not knowing what's going on. So light, frequent communication is the way to do this. When you give updates to your team or to your client constantly, and I've never had a client say, would you please communicate less with us? This is getting annoying. Not once. But instead, wow, it's so nice not to have to ask you where things are at. Thanks. All the time. So just that really consistent refrain. Here's what's happening. Here's what's blocked. Here's what you can expect. Just all the time giving them those updates. Thankfully, I'm pretty OCD. So if I even take half a second to wonder what it's like to be them, I shoot something off immediately because I don't want them to have that stress. Next up, I'm going to talk to you about the next part of my journey. So I got really into switching into freelance. This gave me more time to be able to do some of the things that I've wanted to do. One of the things that I really like is to be able to have more leverage on my time. I want to be able to build a company that can work for me while I'm sleeping. And that's hard to do when you've been in service design, for 25 years. And so I wanted to shift things up. So starting a coffee company at a time when there are crazy tariffs going on and global climate change is causing a smaller area available to grow coffee. Not a great time to start a coffee company, but a decaf coffee company, that is a really large addressable market and almost no competition. So I got excited about that, particularly because I gave up caffeine. It was something I saw as an opportunity. So who here drinks non-alcoholic beer? Okay, so quite a few of us. Now, if I had asked that even like 5 or 7 years ago, that would have been maybe 2 of us at the most. And what's been happening is it's not just that there are more alcoholics like me. Nope. There are so many more people interested in a change in what's happening inside their body, right? And in their mind. And I knew that there was an opportunity to think, you know what? I think caffeine is next. I don't think it'll probably happen at the same level, but I do know that decaf is something that more and more people want. There are something like 40% of Americans have heart disease of some kind, and their doctors are recommending decaf. And how many people love decaf? Yeah, right, exactly. It's really rare to love it. It tastes like shit. And the reason is that decaf is old beans were caffeinated. They were left in a warehouse. They couldn't get sold. Once they're really old, they're like, dang it, what should we do to recoup our costs? I know, let's decaffeinate it. The only way to make that old bean that's now been decaffeinated taste even remotely like coffee is to roast the shit out of it. And that's when you get like that really stale and burnt taste of decaf. And people think that's the decaf taste. No, that's bad bean taste, right? There's a difference. So I set out to change this. Now, everybody knows that decaf is for weak people. So why not call it WIMP and lean in and have some fun, right? I was kind of caught up on what some of these other brands are doing, and Liquid Death is sitting out there taking water and making it punk. And I thought, what can we do with decaf? So let's call it WIMP. Every therapist I know is booked solid for months, but something's happening, and it rhymes with paradigm shift. People are tired of chaos, hustle, and the endless churn. I'm sure many of you are feeling that burn of just constant go, go, go. We all felt it, and then the pandemic hit, and then we've had a really smooth political environment. That's been awesome. And, there's just this constant chaos, and that doesn't feel great on our brain. But coffee's fucking amazing. We love it. It's a really incredible drink, and there's nothing like it. We like the buzz, but we don't like it when it turns into jitters and anxiety. So if we look at Google Trends and what's happening with stress and anxiety, and we see people over the last 20 years searching these topics more and more, we see a problem. Decaf has not kept up with that, right? Here's an ad from, the 70s and 80s that, clearly we've shifted our political ways of thinking about people since then, thankfully. And then finding decaf is really difficult, right? We get excited about wanting delicious coffee. We find a brand that we really love. We maybe find a dark roast decaf, and it's the only option from one roaster, right? Just one option, and that's it. And that's really a frustrating experience. But we can see that the search for decaf follows what's happening with stress and anxiety. We can see that it follows a similar trend to non-alcoholic beer or brands like Liquid Death. So the question for me became, what if decaf was a choice rather than a concession? I'm pretty sure these guys are screaming decaf. I'm not positive, but highly likely. And so I invented this brand, and we built a site, and we are selling it now at Swamp Rabbit Cafe. If you attend Swamp Rabbit, you can get it there. You can get it at wimpdecaf.com. But starting over in a brand new industry is freaking hard. Who here has started over from scratch? That's awesome. 2 times. Okay. Jamie gets it. It's really hard. I know how to do the brand. I know how to do the site. I know how to, create visuals that are compelling and do great copywriting. But logistics and operations and inventory and how to grow an audience for direct to consumer, it's like we're out there, and every time we talk to people, we get great responses. And when we have the conversations, people buy in. But how do you scale that? That's hard to figure out. Getting into ad buying and all of that material, that's the journey we're on. So we launched in January. Things are moving, but it is really difficult. It's expensive too. I had to invest. I sold really good emails. I got bought out of my agency, and I invested that money into this. But figuring it out and making some mistakes along the way, like the bags that are out there on the counter, as an example, those were the first bags. I got them today, and I'm working with a bag distributor in China, and they printed the wrong color, and they printed it on a film that you can sort of see the oil and the beans coming through, and it makes the package look dirty. And I'm pissed because we bought like 10,000 bags. So I've got to figure that out, and hopefully we'll be able to get some recompense for that. But these kinds of things, like in design, I've already done my 20 years, my 10,000 hours. I know how to avoid mistakes like that. I don't know as well in this area. And so I'm learning a ton. And starting over may be dumb, but I love it. And I think that I'll probably, keep doing it in one way, shape, or form for the rest of my life. I get tired and I want to quit a lot, but I wake up and I do it again. And I have a lot of fun. So this has been a journey and I've had a lot of fun. Hopefully, some of what I've shared has given you some ideas about how you might be relating to your job, whether you want to quit it, which I think is fun and awesome, or if you want to double down in a different way and see things from a different perspective. It's fun to do a little bit of storytelling, but I'd love to answer questions if you have any. Thanks. It's a good question. Um, so on on the design side, like as a freelancer, so right now um, I'm freelancing to, keep the lights on and keep my wife and our kiddos fed. And thankfully, my wife contributes well as well. Thanks, Akko. Um, but that part, I need to maintain relationships, right? So I make sure retain great relationships with venture capitalists. And one of the reasons I do that is that they have a one-to-many channel, right? I know that if I'm in relationship with them and they love me, they're going to send me out to 100 people they know frequently. I'm their go-to designer. And if I can just consistently produce results for them, I'm going to consistently get that input. So I'm very intentional about making sure those folks are really happy. And I will often do free design for them. And there's a lot of people in our industry that are like, don't do spec work and that kind of thing. And I'm like, cool, you do you. I'm going to figure out how to keep these folks extremely happy because they usually send me, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in work. So I'm not shy about doing five or $10,000 worth of work for them on, in a heartbeat. For WIMP, the priorities are hard, figuring that one out. So the main thing for us right now, the way that I'm thinking about it is we have a brand, we have our core marketing in place. So those were the sort of table stakes that were necessary. And now it's a matter of making sure that before we start sending a ton of people to the site, we need to make sure our funnel converts. So I want to make sure that I have the right flow in place. And then it's a matter of getting the word out. So it's a good product. We have relatively consistent operations. It has a few snags, but if we don't hammer it with audience, we can grow systematically over time. So figuring that out, though, I think is a real challenge. I think we're learning along the way. But I think now that we have the brand in place and we can tell good stories about it, then the rest are just puzzle pieces to put together. Yeah, good question. Great question. Um, I highly recommend freelancing, and I think that it can be incredibly powerful and give you so much freedom. The things that have been really important to me to get established were if I could have at the beginning, if I could have one or two projects that I knew could get me enough runway to where I could leave what I was doing, then I knew that that was something I was willing to try and take a risk on myself, right? So when you're working for another company, they're betting that they can use your labor, your life force, for their bottom line, right? To add to, they can take the margin they can make off of you and put it in their pocket. And I would rather have that, right? Now, the main thing for me was how do you go from, okay, I can do this project. Can you do all of it? Can you do the design, the development, the iconography, the copywriting, all of that? Or do you need to work with a small team? So you need to get smart about, who you might network with to accomplish a job. You need to think about, things like insurance and how you want to handle that. For the last 20 years, I've been using a cost sharing program and I've really never had insurance. And that's been fine for me. I make enough money that I can pay out of pocket until I hit a catastrophic wall, which is covered. So you want to make sure that you have that kind of thing covered. And then I think you want to get really clear about what you want to work on specifically. So back to what I was showing here, you want to get as niche as you can. So it took me ages to figure this out, and I wish I had figured it out way, way long ago. When I first started, there weren't enough designers around to feel like you needed to be niche. You could be, a reasonable sized fish in a very small pond. Blankenship remembers. And it's just, things change quickly. And so these days, you need to be quite specific. Jamie was talking about being a EOS focused agency for B2B technology businesses, right? That's a pretty good niche, and you could even double down from there. But the reason is, even though we might know I could do design for anybody, right? Like if somebody came to me and said, I need you to help me create a brand for a barber company that sells barber products and we have an academy. Great, put me to work. I could figure that out. But from the client's point of view, they want to know, have you ever worked with barber academies and people that are putting it's like so tiny, but for them, they're like, do you have experience with me? Right? So with the company that Benton was employed with me on, it was called Bunsen. It was the site that I couldn't show you. And it was totally focused on science clients. So all we focused on was biotech and deep tech. And we were known as the agency for that specific vertical. And it was so much more easy to sell to those exact types of clients over and over because they look and they go, oh, I know them and I know them and I know them and I know them. And the referral network within that was incredible. So I highly recommend picking your niche. And you might start with 3 clients that are disparate and not niched. And then you do one. Let's say you work on an auto dealership or something like that. And it goes well. See if you can land another one. And then now you've got 2, right? And just keep building on that until one of them starts to pick up. And then you can develop that niche. So for me, working at Relay Foods and getting into online grocery, that was my niche for a good, probably 8 or 9 years. I knew more than 99.9% of designers out there about high complexity online grocery e-commerce. It's extremely difficult and you have to know a lot of details. And Walmart tried to buy us, and Instacart, borrowed a lot of information from us. Good Eggs borrowed a lot of stuff from us because we knew so much. And so that was really valuable, and I got a lot of work from that. So find that thing and just drill into it. The other thing is if you're not already obsessively using AI in everything you're doing in experimental and fun ways, start. Get as familiar as humanly possible. So as an example, the way that I am now building a lot of my sites is I'm a pretty good copywriter, but I don't like writing long form copy. Please shoot me in the face. That sounds terrible. So instead, what I'll do is I will do a long kickoff call with the client, asking them to explain and pitch their deck to me. Like, give me everything you've got, give me all of your written material, and then show me your competition and anything else you've written. And I'll literally just take that like it's just a pile of trash and I'll dump it into a GPT. And then instead of saying, okay, now write something for me, that's not enough. That's going to create more traffic. There's a framework called Made to Stick. Has anybody read this book by the Heath brothers? Highly recommend it. Good job. Check out Made to Stick. And also, if you haven't read The Challenger Sale or checked it out on YouTube, that's another good one. And I can take that information and I can ask ChatGPT, please run this copy through the made to stick methodology, and it will give me incredible puzzle pieces that then I can use what I know to start assembling those. Okay, the web works this way, that content's too long, make this way, and then I can start working on the copywriting part of it. But that's a great way. Even though I wouldn't sell myself tomorrow as a copywriter, but using AI, I'm able to do so much more than ever before, right? Things like that. So just getting really familiar with that territory. And then making sure you're well contracted. A contract is not a guarantee. I've never had to sue a client. I have been sued because people are crazy, but the contract was there to just protect me so that I was able to have good legal recourse, so that we could have it wasn't a slam dunk, right? So you just want to make sure that you don't just take a boilerplate contract, but that you get it worked through with some kind of legal. Um, and just when you work with your client, their team probably will push back on your contract and have a lawyer work with you on that. It's worth the expense because you don't want to just have your knees cut out from underneath you. But if you decide to go freelance, or anybody here and you want to talk about this, I love it. I get really nerdy about it. Please reach out. I'm literally just at Whale on Twitter, well, X, and Instagram, like Whale with the animal. So just DM me, say hey, and we'll talk about it. I love doing that. Cool. Anybody else? Jeremy. Yeah, it's a good question. So, not you're saying like within an industry, not from design to e-commerce. Yes, right. Great question. So when I went from before Bunsen, I did very generic design. Walmart, um, uh, lots of big marketplaces. We would do anything. It was like the biggest clients that, would sign us were great. But then as more and more designers were out there, it was harder and harder to find work. And so I shut that agency down. And in my case, I knew a guy named Michael Plansky who he he was running the family office for the Parker Foundation. So that's Sean Parker, Napster, first investor in Facebook. He had an organization called the Parker Institute of Cancer Immunotherapy. And Michael had told me it is amazing how no agencies can really get the science and the design right here. They can get the design, but they totally, fumble here on the science. And so I knew, okay, I'm smart. We can figure that out. Maybe I can't do the science, but we can build a team that is diverse enough to do something like that. So to me, it would be like, who do I know in this space who knows a lot of people or can help get us well connected? So in our case, we had a guy named Ben Kellogg, and Ben was a PR specialist in that industry, and we made him a partner on the team. And his personality was a little difficult, but ultimately that was a wise decision in terms of the type of person to partner with. Without that, I don't think that would have been as successful. If I were to do that freelancing, I would have instead just figured out a way where, Ben, you do all the PR kind of stuff and you refer design to me, and we'll go back and forth on this. And so to find a team where you can really activate that, I think Jamie was saying like EOS implementers often refer his agency. That's the exact same kind of connection. So you want to find somebody that's already like embedded in that niche. And one of the things that I've had to remember, like with WIMP right now, we need press. And somebody had to remind me recently, you need press, but the press needs stories. Well, yeah, That's cool. So it just, I don't know why, but I thought like I'm always going uphill. No, they need stories too. And so the other people, like the implementers, they want to be famous with their clients. And Jamie wants that connection. So that can go both ways in a really wonderful way, right? So finding those kinds of people, um, and and then just learn everything you can about that industry. Um, the thing that I was saying about who's heard of Challenger Sale? Anybody? Sweet. So the most basic way of understanding Challenger Sale that was really influential for me is when you can ask your client questions about their industry that indicate that you know about the industry at least as well as they do. They go from that sort of like, okay, he's trying to sell something to me to, oh my God, you might give me relief. Please teach me, show me. I want to know more. And that experience, you go from adversary to advisor. And that shift, you're in immediately. They want that because, again, they're looking for so much information, right? They're trying to succeed. And now you might be a tool to be able to do that. So I just found, and even in science, I'll say this, I was nervous that I didn't know enough about science to be effective on sales calls and stuff like that. But it turned out that and I don't have a business degree, I have an art degree. When I went to the University of Portsmouth, where I got my part of my art degree from, there was a toilet paper roll in the bathroom, and above it, it said art degree, just take one. That, it's about the value of like the actual degree. Like what I learned was the visual language, right? But with these science clients, I was able to use my business street smarts with like, we're talking PhD, really, really smart folks. And I could say, I don't understand the business logic of what you're doing. I'm really sorry. Have I missed something? Our investors have been saying the same thing. Really? Oh shit. Like, okay, I guess I do know a little bit here. Or I'll say, is it that you're doing this and you're connecting this need to this need and that's not been present in the market before? Wow, that's it. But you actually unlocked something we hadn't thought of. That's smart. Shit. Okay. And it's just, bringing what you have can be really influential. So that's what's worked for me. I don't know if it would work for everybody. Again, it's an awesome question. Anybody else? That's a good question. As I said, I'm quite neurospicy, so I need a lot of freedom in my schedule. One, talking to Jamie about this earlier, I need to do some form of physical exercise to wake my brain and my body up. Akko and I love to go walk our dog Mochi, and that's a really important way to start my day. Meditate 4 or 5 mornings out of the week. And that's incredibly important to my serenity. I don't book any meetings before noon. Like occasionally, I'll let a European client sneak in there because it's going to be nighttime their time. But generally speaking, that's sacred creative time. And by the time noon, 1, 2 comes around, my brain's a little fatigued and I'm much better at meetings in that zone. And I've learned that about myself. So everybody's going to be a little different about how you work, but that's been really important to me. And then I also know I can't do more than 2 meetings a day, or I am a grumpy curmudgeon, and somebody's going to ask me to sleep on the couch. So I got to figure out, how to show up in a way that protects my wellness. Um, but I have to get a lot done, so I have to be thoughtful about using my calendar and like getting scheduled out about that. But I also try and only take on 2 freelance clients at a time. Now, sometimes I get like 2.5 or 3 for a week, but generally speaking, if I know that okay, my rate is 7K a week, this is how I work. And then I can schedule, like, I'm taking all of September off to go to Japan this year. And it's like, sweet, I can do that. I have enough savings. I know my rates. I know I can go book more work. Cool. I'm going to go do that, right? I'm living the way I want to live. And I've never done that until I got more serious about this kind of work. But the other thing I like to do is I like to not get my inspiration from other design. So there's a guy named Craig Maud who I've just been kind of fanboying over right now. He's written a book called Things Become Other Things. Really amazing book about walking Japan and taking photos and just some stories from his experience. When I read his material, I just feel like I come alive. So reading that. I love going to switch yards is where I tend to work, and they have some great books on the counter, and I love just thumbing through those. And I love talking to my friends about, what they're doing, and getting inspired and being curious. Like that's how I come alive. So all that together is a pretty good package for me. Yeah, thanks for asking. What else, folks? Anything? Appreciate you being here and asking these great questions.